what is it called when you can telekinesis? Kind of reminded me of Wakanda with the vibranium. If only this were true. And hi everyone, welcome to this video. My name's Gabrielle, and you'll find on my channel I have a lot of videos about books and all the hilarious things that I'm reading lately. But today I'm really excited to talk about a book by an independently published author. And as I've gotten more into creating videos about books and diving back into my love for books after some years of reading nothing at all, on Instagram I have had some fun following some independent authors. As a child, you know, you just go to the library, you see what's available, and you check it out, and that was pretty much all the books that I read, either the library or from school, which are traditionally published. And so I wasn't really attuned to the independent publishing world, but now that I'm an adult and social media is thriving, I'm able to be connected to some of the indie books out there, and I'm really excited to check them out. As I've gotten back to my love for reading, I've also gotten back to some of my love for writing. I used to do a lot of writing when I was young, and you know, it kind of that creativity starts to spark in you again. So in the back of my head, I have a hope of one day being traditionally published, but I always know that independent publishing is an option. And it's very, you know, brave, and it takes a lot of work for these authors to publish their work independently. And so whenever I come across one that strikes my interest, I get really excited to read it. Now, I have read some in the past that I'm not really going to talk about because I didn't enjoy them. I will review books honestly, regardless of whether they are independently published or not. Even if I, you know, follow the author on Instagram and feel a bit of a parasocial connection with them, I always review as honest as I can because I do want them to have that feedback and not try to lie to people. I'm not really into lying. I would rather just have the harsh truth, like if I were an author myself. So I do review honestly, but I don't necessarily want to like talk about those books in a video because I feel like that's kind of undue hatred. Like if they're already small, they have a small audience, they're an independent author, what good is it gonna do if I'm talking about their book to a few hundred people? You know, like all I'm gonna do is discourage people from reading it when I already submit my review. Whereas I do feel more comfortable giving negative reviews to books that have large audiences or have themes that are a part of a larger conversation. Like if there is a book that's small audience but it has something like very problematic or something really good, then I'm open to talking about it. I hope that makes sense, but yeah. Regardless of that, Anastasia by Sophie Lark was one of the books I planned to read in January, and I am so thankful that I did. I hadn't read anything by Sophie Lark prior to this, but wow, this one just stood out. It's my only 5-star read of the year so far. It's only been a month, but I mean, out of like 15 books that I've read so far this year, only one 5-star read, and it was absolutely amazing. In terms of what this book is about, so if you are familiar with world history, the czars of Russia in their, you know, previous iterations of the country, there were czars who were essentially like an emperor. And in the early 1900s, like the 1910s, the current czar, I think Alexander, and his family were assassinated by, I believe, a rebel organization that were, you know, like disapproving of his politics and how he ran the country. So there was a lot of myth and lore and conversation after his family was assassinated surrounding his youngest daughter, Anastasia. Many people, I think what the situation is that they couldn't find her remains in the area with the rest of the family, so it was kind of a mystery of whether she escaped and was potentially in hiding. In years following, occasionally some women would show themselves as, you know, I'm really Anastasia, I've been in hiding all this time, but none were ultimately proved to be her. So I believe most historians agree that she passed away when her family passed away, and maybe she was like taken by the captors somewhere separately. So it's a very, very like unfortunate situation. I also want to premise, you know, as I'm talking about this video, I know there's a lot more depth into Russian politics and how people viewed the Tsar at the time. So not regarding his politics, I say it's sad because it was someone, you know, had their life taken from them. So that's just an unfortunate situation overall. I'm not speaking to how he ran his country or not, because I'm not as well informed ultimately. Throughout this book, Anastasia is our primary character, and the whole story follows her from when she's like, I don't even know, maybe like 7 years old to when she ultimately is about like 21 years old in the end of the book. So we get quite a bit of her life in this world. So it's a retelling of her story, and Sophie Lark describes it as the story that she wanted Anastasia to have. And it is a fantasy story as well, so there are magical elements involved. In their world, some people can have no magic at all, but it's known that the Tsar's family has really strong magic, and so each of his children at certain points in their life do these certain like performances, kind of like a coming out party or like a, you know, debutante ball or like a bat mitzvah of sorts, where they reveal what their powers are. The Tsar himself has power of time control, so he can slow down time, so he's moving quicker while everyone is stalled. His wife, Anastasia's mother, has, what is it called when you can, telekinesis? You can move things with your mind, but she doesn't really use it that much because she doesn't really like women to use their power. Like, it's more for the men to use in their society. Women are not trained to increase their power in any way, but it is known that with training and more knowledge, you can increase your magical powers. Some of Anastasia's siblings have other powers, like really advanced hearing, control over plants and flowers. Her brother has telekinesis. Ultimately, the story is about her family. There's this certain gemstone, kind of reminded me of Wakanda with the vibranium. There's a certain gemstone in Russia that's known to like amplify your magical power. So the Tsar and the royal family have control over that. They use that to like dominate over enemies in war and things like that. When Anastasia is very young, she sneaks away with her father as he's taking her brother on this trip to their war camp. He's taking the youngest son because they know he will eventually be the Tsar, but she wants to know what's going on as well, so she sneaks on the train as they're going out into, you know, the remote areas with this war camp, and they're meeting up with this group of men. What were they called? I think it's pronounced Cossack. So when they arrive in this remote area, they're meeting up with this Cossacks, which are kind of like independent native people of Russia is what I gathered. Again, I'm not as familiar with like Russian history, so I'm not going to claim to know everything, but I'm just taking what I got from the story. They're striking up a deal between the Cossack leader and the Tsar, where the Cossacks will pledge their loyalty to the Tsar and serve him in order to kind of strike a unity between the people, so they have stronger power against external enemies. As they're striking this deal, the Cossack's son, who is a young boy about Anastasia's age, attempts to strike down the Tsar and kill him. And here's a little bit of a spoiler, though it's early on in the story. That is the first moment in which Anastasia realizes she has control over the time. So she unknowingly slows down time and is able to run and like move her father out of the way and move the boy so that his knife doesn't like strike through the Tsar from behind. So they realize the son was attempting to assassinate the Tsar. They are saying now he will come and learn in the like royal schools where other children are trained to like go join the army. He will come and train and live with them until he's like old enough to serve in the army. So he's like terrified and sad because now he has to leave his family and his father for like 10 years plus. But he has to go with them because otherwise he will die. That's the beginning of the story. His name's Damien, and the story really goes from there. There's so much richness to this story. Like, oh my gosh, where do I even begin? As the story progresses, Damien and Anastasia are always kind of the like opposites of each other, but they also have this connection to each other since they met each other so young, and they both knew they had this heavy magic because Damien has a really like heavy magic. I don't know how else to describe it, where like it burdens him. He essentially has the power where if he like touches something, he drains the life from it. Humans, animals, nature, anything. So he's always wearing gloves. So he's weighed down by the pressure of this magic. And Anastasia is weighed down by having multiple abilities and affinities for many types of magic, but not being able to hone them and enhance them because, again, in her society, like, women are not supposed to advance their magic or use it really in any way. Like, she's supposed to marry a royal from another country, and that's that. Like, maybe it'll be helpful for her to move things around their house or like arrange furniture if she has telekinesis. Like, that's the extent of it. She's not gonna have like true power in her life. Their stories intermingle as time goes on. I think I'll just end the plot summary there because I don't want to spoil it or give away what's going to happen, but you may know the term or the person Rasputin, who's like a known character in a lot of like, I think he was a real person, but I know his character is also used in a lot of fictional stories about Russia, and he's this kind of like enemy that infiltrates the nobility in their world. And so he is in there as well, and there's so many different components. There's romance, there's a lot of fantasy, and Anastasia goes through such incredible character development. At certain points in the story, she, you know, has to work like the normal, regular people in her world work. I think she's like spinning thread for clothing, so she's in a factory, at a mill, working, breaking her back, working like 12 hours every day, so she's able to finally understand like how people are living under her father's reign, and why people like Damien have always said that like she needs to get her head out of the clouds. Like, she has a very privileged life, and he understands that she could never understand his perspective or like the regular man's perspective because that's just not her world. But she does have the opportunity to get to see what life is really like for people. So yeah, there's a lot of really important themes, like, you know, the importance of family, finding love, believing in yourself, and ultimately having hope for the future is like the biggest one. In the end of the book, it does have a happy ending, though it's not a totally perfect ending, which I really appreciated. Like I mentioned, Sophie added a note how this is a story she wanted Anastasia to have, and I really love that. Like, if only this were true and, you know, she could have had this great life, that would be beautiful. But that's not the reality, but we can at least, like, you know, pretend and hope that the lessons from the book teach us in our real lives. There were like familiars, which, if you're not familiar with that term, that often relates in fantasy books to animal companions. So there's a familiar in this book, and oh my gosh, that was like my favorite character. I love her. Like, oh my goodness. Like, if you ask me who my favorite character is from a lot of like shows like Avatar: The Last Airbender, it's gonna be Appa. Like, I love them so much. And Artemis is our beloved familiar in this book, and overall the writing is really great. So I would encourage anyone who enjoys fantasy and maybe historical fiction to truly check it out. There were a few things that I didn't love that I'll go ahead and mention now. Like I said, the book was overall great. I loved it, 5-star, but doesn't mean it was totally perfect. And a few things that I would change are, I've seen this with other indie books as well. But I noticed that with Sophie Lark, she added in, within the text, at certain points, there would be a song name and the artist. And I gathered that the message was to play the song while you're reading the next scene, and it would like set the tone for you. And I really do not like that. I don't like to listen to anything while I'm reading. I like to just focus when I'm doing, music included. And I also didn't like how it was actually within the text. So it would randomly be, you know, like Yellow by Coldplay. I'm like, wait, what? Like, I don't know if that song itself was in there, but as an example, like, I was like, wait, what is going on? Why is it saying this? Like, just randomly within the text. So it kind of pulls you out of the story a bit. I don't mind if authors want a playlist or a suggested list of songs, but I think it'd be better just like include it at the beginning of the book and say like, on this page, you know, you play this song, and just put the page with the songs instead of writing it in the text, because it just pulls you out and it's not necessary. Next thing I thought wasn't as essential to the story is there are sex scenes within this book, and I didn't think it was totally necessary. I think maybe that was done because I've since learned that Sophie Lark writes a lot of like adult books, so there are a lot of sex scenes and romance within her books, so people want that and expect that from her. I didn't think it was as necessary to this story. It did feel a little bit weird, like knowing it was a real person and this is a fake story of her life, and interjecting in sex scenes was kind of unnecessary. Like, real Anastasia died as, I believe, a 17-year-old, so she was a child. So I didn't think it was totally necessary to write in those scenes when, like, ultimately in real life, like, you're writing about a child, even though within the scenes she was not. You know what I mean? And then the last one is not really that big of a deal, but there are a lot of illustrations in the book, and I absolutely loved them. I thought they were so beautiful, and they really helped you visualize the story, but I also think that those could have gone without, just because the book was very long. It was like 800 something pages, but a lot of that is illustrations, so it probably would be like maybe in the high 500 pages. So it's not a short book, but it seems like incredibly long if you're just looking at it by page number. So I think that can maybe stop some people from looking into it. So I would want more people to look at it, which is why I say I could go for removing those, even though I personally enjoyed them. I know I was kind of long-winded in my thoughts, but honestly, when am I not long-winded? So I hope this was enjoyable for you. Again, I definitely recommend checking out this book. It was on Kindle Unlimited when I got it, so if you have that, feel free to look into it. But yeah, let me know your thoughts and what you're reading lately. Don't forget to like the video if you did enjoy, and subscribe so you can stay tuned for more. I will see you in another video very soon.